You? Well, I was overwhelmed by the challenge of sharing about something I've learned during my experience at Gordon. There are so many things that God has taught me and that I'm still learning. Life is about learning, and college has been a place in which I've learned that I know very little, and I will always continue to learn. But in order to learn, we need to recognize that we don't know, and that's humility. And I will talk about vulnerability, so don't be surprised if I use that term. I remember telling some people that I had been learning that it's okay to recognize our vulnerability, not pretending to be strong and firm. But to some people, the term seems not appropriate. To be vulnerable sounds scary. Sounds like as if we were exposed to danger with no refuge. And perhaps that's why vulnerability seems not the most appropriate term. But when we encounter others, we become vulnerable, not knowing how they will take us. I was in Orvieto, Italy, last semester, and that word came up several times. The director of the program would read to us, and he read from Jean Panier, who used the term vulnerability a lot, emphasizing our need to be vulnerable in order to allow for community. Panier is a Catholic philosopher who talks a lot about community and how hard it is because, as he says in one of his books, to grow in love requires work, hard work, and it can bring pain because it implies loss of certitudes, comforts, and hurts that shelter and defines us. And so we're called to love. Well, I was so happy about that because the year before Orvieto, I was an RA. And it was in that context that I finally began understanding that what vulnerability meant and how it benefited my community. To allow relations that would be intentional and strong, I needed to recognize my own fragility and to expose myself to the uncertainty of being vulnerable and be okay with that. To be able to recognize that I also had lots of questions, that I was not strong or good. We are all weak, we are imperfect, we're broken, human. However, the hope we find in God is not because of us, but because He loves us, regardless of our own imperfections. As a child, I was so shy and insecure. I am still. But I have been learning that my confidence is in the Lord. I did not live acknowledging that. You see, I used to be a perfectionist, seeking people's approval. I had no idea what grace really meant because I was so busy checking on my own steps to make sure they were right. They were perfect. And if they weren't, I would pretend they were. No one could laugh at me. I feared that so much. At home, I would work hard to be a good daughter, to make my parents proud, because I thought I needed to earn their love. And that love would make me feel confident. I remember I would get feverish on the way to school every day because of nervousness. What if I forgot something? What if I had an exam I did not study for? So many possibilities of things going wrong made me sick. And since I was striving for perfectionism to be accepted, to me, everybody else seemed confident and sounded strong, so I had to pretend. I had to come this far away to be reminded that I'm not perfect and won't be. That it's okay when you don't know most things as long as you're willing to learn. Learning should be joyful, not frightening, exciting, and leading us to strive for more learning. But fear is not a healthy way of learning, nor it is seeking acceptance. I remember my freshman year, I was quiet because of fear of imperfection. What if I did not fit in? What if I spoke nonsense? I know now that not only international students deal with those fears. I was facing a different culture. I did not know the rules. I did not know what was expected. Many times I would have no idea of the conversations taking place in the group or on the table. Did you realize that a lot of the talking we do nowadays sounds so influenced by the media, shows, movies, music, things I did not know about? Language is more complex than just grammar. It is cultural. I am thankful for those that explained to me. But before that, I had to recognize that I did not know. That I did not understand what was happening or why things were so important. I remember in the midst of all that uncertainty, telling myself, you need help. You need to seek it. Asking for help was admitting all the things that I did not want to be reminded of. And it was because of my classes I ended up seeking it. I would come to the writing center with drafts so many times, wanting to know what did not make sense. How could I put reasonable words to my thoughts? I come from a culture in which we did not have to write. We took exams. I feared to be laughed at, to be silly. I thought I had no idea what I was doing. My dad, my family, who would always listen, who would love me, were far away. All I knew was God had brought me here, and He had plans I did not know. All I knew was that He was going to teach me, to shape me, and it was not going to be easy. At that point, I would have never guessed I could be an RA or that I would go abroad again, but I did. After I recognized my own neediness, I learned so much, and I gained confidence, not in me, but in the Lord. I learned about grace and about love. I went back home that first winter break, and my mom and my sisters did not recognize me. They said I was so joyful that they saw me laughing at myself, and they laughed along. I guess I was less stressed. At that moment, I did not understand why. It was being an RA that I learned that openness about my uncertainties and fears, my imperfections, was important because everyone has them. When we are open, people do not feel they have to pretend anymore. Well, not always, but at least you open the door. And it is uncomfortable because we don't know how to deal with brokenness, even when we are broken. God uses that even when we don't know He does. As the Bible says, He knows us, knows our heart and fears, and He's waiting for us to take that step and seek His help. And after we do, He takes care of the process. But the first step is so difficult, and it is the one we have to take on our own. I learned that to be vulnerable, it was easier to find refuge, to find hope in the Lord, to help others, and to learn from others. You see, we are so confident in His love, and that allows us to be vulnerable among others because His love is already secure. As an artist, I used to think, well, people do not see the work in progress, they will see the results. I did not know how important it was to have people look at the work in progress in order to get a good result. And I'm reminded of that every time I paint. The other day, I was waiting for a professor to look at my work, and I was reminded of my peers. Suddenly, I wish I had done more work. I wish my paintings looked better, more resolved. As I prayed, God reminded me that I needed help and that He had placed people in my life to help me. And I needed to be able to be vulnerable and not pretend that I figured it all out. It is such a blessing to learn from others, to be able to listen, to see that they did not always know, but they learned and are continuing to learn as I am, as we are. In Orvieto during the first month, we were told to trust many times. We do not need a roadmap on our hands when there is someone guiding. We were told to do things not knowing where we were being led to. And I'm thankful for that because I wouldn't have had the chance to enjoy the present had I known what awaited in the future. I like controlling things, knowing what I will do, when, and how. But God wants me to trust. As a senior, I know that there are many of us who might have a plan for next year. But do we really know? I think that is the scariest part of leaving school, not knowing. But it's also a great chance to trust in God and see His goodness. While trusting, we should invest in what is at present. Yet I am reminded of that every day. I used to think I would reach a point in which I would be ready to serve others, but God taught me that there is not a specific point in my life in which I would turn to be a fit servant, but that every day was a time to serve, even when I feel I'm still learning. Vanier says two things I think are important to remember. First of all of us have secret desires to be seen as saints, heroes, martyrs. We are afraid to be children, to be ourselves. The Bible tells us to be like children, to trust as they do. I do not know if you do, but I often feel like a child, not knowing, but joyful and secure in my Father's love. Second, he says, but let us not put our sights too high. We do not have to be saviors of the world. We are simply human beings, enfolded in weakness and in hope, called to change our world, one heart at a time. Let me share with you a poem that was read to us as we began our journey in a foreign country where we did not know about the culture, about the language, or the things we would have to face in Italy. This is from Rainer Maria Rilke's, it's French, from his book of Hours. How surely gravity's laws, strong as an ocean current, takes hold of even the strongest thing and pulls it towards the heart of the world. Each thing, each stone, blossom, child is held in place. Only we, in our arrogance, push out beyond what we belong to for some empty freedom. If we surrender to the earth's intelligence, we could rise up rooted like trees. Instead, we entangle ourselves in knots of our own making and struggle, lonely and confused. So like children, we begin again to learn from the things because they are in God's heart. They have never left Him. This is what things can teach us, to fall, patiently to trust our heaviness, Even a bird has to do that before he can fly. I would say, know where you stand, fragile and broken, but rooted in Him, who wants you to grow and to learn. It is difficult to recognize our vulnerability as humans because we want to be loved, but we are. We might not know about tomorrow, and that is because we need to focus on today and trust in God. He will shape us, He will use us, not because we are worthy, but because He can, because He had chosen to fulfill His plans, allowing us to be part of that, to bless others as we're willing to be vulnerable. The only thing He needs is that we are able to be sincere, to trust Him, and He will teach us to fly. And yet, we need not to forget our own heaviness. Thank you.